champion will fall.
Ready yourself, my champion. I cannot aid you in this battle.
The dark side fades.
Okay, just wanted to open up the video with this, show you guys I'm not using the original sin. This is a full cold version of the build that is also, for all intents and purposes, at least to me, pretty hardcore viable as well. This is the tankiest version that I could think of, with about an hour of setting it up this morning, and the damage is still really good. PoB is showing effectively about 36 to 37 million DPS at, perfect setup, and this is very, very tanky. No original sin, no expeditions end, higher investment. This is really good gear, but this is a variation that should be accessible to most players. I think this is the aspirational version of the build for people that don't want to buy the super, super expensive stuff. And I wanted to show it off. I wanted to show that this build could be made to be effectively hardcore viable, very, very tanky, very solid, and prove the haters wrong. So let's talk about what I put together this morning. So I woke up this morning. There's someone on Twitter that absolutely hates me for some reason. Their past 3 tweets have been about how much my build is bait and how much they don't like me. So I guess I'm doing something right. I just wanted to address the concerns with the tanky PoB that I posted in the original build guide and show what the aspirational high-end version could be if you want to do no expeditions end, no original sin, and still be very tanky and very high damage. I like to think of PoBs as a proposal and a set of ideas for a framework for you to put together your own build and to customize yourself. I think I make that fairly clear if you actually watch the build guide. I had a full slide. I talked for 5 or 10 minutes about defenses, different options if you want to make it very, very tanky, if you want to play it in hardcore. But my definition of tanky is just not the same as a hardcore player's. I run very, very rippy maps. As long as I die maybe at the most 1 in 20 maps, to me that's okay. And I understand hardcore defenses, and I've won hardcore solo self-found races. I understand it, and I don't think that you have to play that way. I don't think that should be the default that players have to think for, a relatively tanky build in softcore. That's just my own bias and opinion, but I will put forth the options if you want to go that tanky. And that's what I did here. And just to directly address a couple things here, I strongly advise people, please stop looking at this Fizzmax hit number. I think a lot of hardcore players, it makes sense, right? They're reviewing PoBs as if they're playing hardcore. That Fizzmax hit number, it matters a little bit. It's really not as important in softcore as people think it is. People like to talk about, EHP and all that type of stuff. And the problem is that's just a rough calculation that Path of Building does. And I think it is actually kind of harmful to people looking at builds, especially if they don't watch the actual build guide and how they evaluate builds. Just a quick little example here is Ghost Dance is one of the strongest defensive nodes in the entire game. If you're on the right side of the tree, if you're evasion and energy shield based, this is a must-have, and it makes you so, so tanky for the effective way that the game actually works. The problem is EHP, it doesn't take it into account. It does absolutely nothing in PoB. What a build actually feels like is just not indicated by these silly numbers that are calculated in a third-party tool. That's just not the real world and how a build actually feels. The other thing is people were unchecking Immortal Call. I left it on purpose. The reason why I did that is because the way that this build is set up with pretty high evasion chance and Ghost Shrouds is Immortal Call, for all intents and purposes, will be up almost a majority of the time based on when you get hit. And 9,700 Fizzmax hit is still pretty good, in my opinion. If you're not in hardcore, that is an acceptable, good number. I really want to push back against the hardcore brain that's been encroaching so hard into softcore, where we can't even say something is relatively tanky in softcore without seeing hardcore viable numbers. It's really frustrating, and I'm always going to be pushing against that. It's really limiting the design space for us having fun in the game. And if you actually watched the build guide yesterday, I feel like all of those concerns are generally addressed. I'm not trying to bait people. I'm trying to give you a realistic expectation of the way that a build works and feels. I mean, hardcore people with their own hardcore attitudes are going to be pushing up against it, and all I can do is push back. I think we can have builds and call them relatively tanky in softcore without hardcore numbers. So that's my bias right there. I talk about options and I present them. I put things forward as realistically as I believe that they are. So anyway, sorry, long caveats right there, but I think it's important also to display my bias and my feelings there so you guys can understand what to expect when you put together a build that I put out there. So yeah, what I did this morning is I spent about an hour converting my build to a non-original sin, pure cold conversion, Reap / Sanguinate Occultist and I went as tanky as I think is remotely required ever in softcore. I took the Sacrificial Garb, which I actually had originally in the Blade Vortex version. Sacrificial Garb is actually really important because we want armor evasion and energy shield, because we are using Eldritch Battery here, which solves our mana issues. We're primarily armor-based here. As you can see, I'm running Determination and Defiance Banner. I am not running Grace. Just couldn't fit Grace in addition. Very good life. Other thing is, our crit chance is actually solved by this. We get spell crit, we get +1 curse, and we get our spell suppression, really good life. This is like the really big foundational piece that enables a lot about making this build a lot tankier. Just wanted to add in one additional thing here that I did miss in the original recording is you can also go for a very strong Rog Crafted Shield. These are all tier 2 to tier 3 mods. You get about 2,000 armor. You can get 7% additional physical damage reduction. As you can see, the damage numbers are still really solid. This is a Rog crafted pure armor shield, very easy to get. And then what you can also do is go for an armor-based shield. I realized that people could buy these up really quickly if they wanted to. Instead of going for the big shield that I have with the +1 that has to be energy shield based, we can go for a pure armor or armor evasion based shield with the +1 max power charge synthesized mod. We lose a little bit of damage from the +1 fizz. You don't get that outside of pure ES bases, but you can get a lot of additional armor just doing this. And if you're willing to drop one more power charge, you can still keep your damage pretty decent and get really, really tanky. Just get something Rog crafted and you're good to go. And then as you can see, that pushes our fizz max hit up to over 20k and our EHP getting closer to 80k, which, as I said, are not numbers that matter, but if you do care about those numbers, you can just do that. Back to past me. And then, as I said, I am now using Determination and Defiance Banner. Our full auras are Herald of Ash, Defiance Banner, Determination, Herald of Purity, and Vitality. Now, fitting all of those in was a bit of a struggle. I didn't want to recraft all my gear. This is a high investment version of the build, but this is my aspirational proposal to you guys. As you see, I'm not using the original Sin. I'm now using Circle of Guilt, a Circle of Guilt with increased buff effect and mana reservation efficiency. I got this for 50 chaos this morning. It has no good implicits that matter. Cool thing about it is it gives us armor, some damage, and some attributes. The enchant on my Heat Shiver is Herald of Purity has increased mana reservation efficiency. We could do this with Herald of Purity or Herald of Ash, or even better would be Determination or Hatred mana reservation efficiency. So any of those is really good, allows us to fit in all of our auras. And then I am running Enduring Cry, which gives us our endurance charges, makes us much, much tankier. And then I have a level 9 Molten Shell with a level 2 cast when damage taken and life tap right here, which gives us a Molten Shell, which makes us much, much tankier. And then the flasks that I'm running are a Jade Flask of Evasion, a Granite Flask of Armor, and I'm using a Quicksilver, which now has reduced effect of curses on me during the flask effect. I'm also running you take 30% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. That helps a lot for dealing with bursty damage. You can see I have about 6k total life. Unfortunately, getting enough Chaos Res, I didn't want to recraft my gear, but we could get these 3 passive points back if I did recraft my gear to have some more Chaos Res on it, which would allow us to get a lot more damage or defense if you wanted to. And then you'll notice that I did path all the way down here. This has 2 benefits. It gives us some more life. You could run a life flask if you wanted to and you cared to. And it gives us a lot of dexterity, which allows us to run our high-level hatred. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. Other thing is I did discover the beauty of Progenesis yesterday, which also gives us max Chaos Res if you want to assume that it's always up. I don't have it equipped right now, but if you want to use Progenesis, this is an absolutely ridiculous, awesome flask that makes you feel almost immortal. I strongly, strongly recommend it, but it is pretty expensive right now, so I'm not using it in the example. The other thing is I am using the Balance of Terror here with the crit multi Enfeeble and the physical damage Ellie weakness. This gives us a lot of offensive power, and since we're also running Enfeeble, it also makes us very strong defensively as well against enfeebled enemies. Because we're reserving almost all of our mana, I am using Eldritch Battery here. This solves our mana issues entirely, and then I am using an Area of Effect, Towering Threat, Vast Power, Medium Cluster Jewel. This configuration of the build, I'm really, really happy with even mapping with Reap. I'm not even bothering with Exsanguinate here, and it feels exceptionally good. So because of that, we really want to scale as much AoE as possible, make it much more likely to get that 4x overlap on the Reap, and it feels really, really good. And this way, I also don't even bother with any gem swaps or anything like that, which is obviously great. The main links that I'm using are Reap, Awakened Fire Pen actually, because we're doing so much Cold as Extra Fire. This is actually the highest damage single gem that we have here. This is a dirt cheap gem, and Empower, Awakened Spell Cascade, Divergent Power Charge on crit, and Hypothermia. Hypothermia is not best in slot. If I had white sockets right here, I could swap in something like Awakened Spell Echo, which gives us a lot more damage, but it does lock us down a little bit, so that's really only for bossing. So we can do a quick little map like this, 89% quant, nothing particularly crazy here. I'll kill a couple packs of monsters with Reap, The clear is pretty good. I think it's totally acceptable to run it like that. I do recommend using Exsanguinate for clear because it just feels really, really good. And we'll demonstrate both of those. So you can just run around with Reap like this, and I think it feels pretty good. I am happy like this. The cool thing here is the damage is still really, really solid. You know, you can shred those essence monsters, but the clear is not as good as Exsanguinate. So if we do a quick little gem swap here, put in Exsanguinate, put in Awakened Chain, and put in increased critical damage instead of Awakened Spell Cascade, I think Exsanguinate is just one of the nicest clearing spells in the game. It feels super, super awesome. You're going fast as hell. If you're just going to be mapping really, really quickly and not fighting too many big, scary monsters, I do recommend just keeping Exsanguinate in. It'll take a few hits to kill the map boss. Like, this might be take a little bit to kill the... Oh, I take it back. All right, that essence monster got deleted. Sometimes I even underestimate how much damage is in this build. You know, even the cold, non-original Sin version. This is higher investment. I have 11 power charges. But yeah, it feels really, really good. I am incredibly happy with it. And then let's go back to the Reap setup to finish off the rest of this map, just to kind of demonstrate, you know, what that's going to feel like if you keep that going in an entire map. So the one thing that I am doing that's a little clunky that you have to get used to, but it's not that bad, is doing the manual cast of Enfeeble and Elemental Weakness. This does give us a lot of damage. It is optional. I really usually only do it on the boss room. So, you know, you may really, really not like that setup, but it doesn't bother me particularly much. And yeah, this is what it feels like so far. So if we go in here, curse the bosses, pop our flasks, and kill them in 2 hits. And this is the cold version without Original Sin. This is higher investment, but it is nearly 40 million DPS as well. There is not a single super scary required unique whatsoever. I know that Awakened Spell Cascade is pretty expensive right now, but besides going for a Heat Shiver, you know, double corrupt it yourself. You know, buy all those 5C Heat Shivers. They're still really cheap. Corrupt them yourself until you get +1 max power charge. This is a very easy to craft body armor. Maybe Local Hall wants to make a crafting guide for this, but it's really easy to get. Just do Reforged Caster until you're happy with your suffixes. Wild Bristle Matron or suffixes can't be changed. Reforged Caster. You guarantee get +1 curse. It's a very, very easy craft. This is tanky as hell. This is basically a hardcore viable version of the build. If you want to do it like this, the POB is in the description below. I appreciate everyone that's been enjoying this build. I really want to support it, and I really believe in it. It is not bait. It's a great build. Sorry. You put a lot of work into something, and it's just like, I don't know why people just spread lies. That's a little update for you guys. If you want to play a variation that is actually very, very tanky, I will put the aspirational POB, what this is right now, as I just showed it to you guys, in the description below. Please ask as many questions as you want. Join the Discord, ask me on Twitch. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy the build, and I hope you guys are having fun playing Path of Exile. See y'all tomorrow. Goodbye.